everybody. It's Helen Hillix, licensed therapist, intuitive counselor, and your host always for From My Heart to Yours. Today, I have the inimitable pleasure of having a wonderful guest, Camden Hoch, who is an author, a mom, a yogini, a speaker, a wife, all kinds of cool things. And she's going to be talking to us today, or sharing a conversation with us about the topic of sex and spirituality, passionate intimacy without shame. And I'm going to immediately plug her book, which is Roadmap to Radiance. And it is a very powerful book. She's going to tell you how to get that later in the interview. But it's a very powerful book about the pain of growing up in an alcoholic family and all of the incredibly painful, self-destructive things that she got into. But it's primarily a story of transformation and inspiration. And that's why I invited Camden to join us today. So without further ado, I would love, Camden, for you to tell us, just dive in and tell us how your life story has guided you to become a yogini and a writer and a speaker.
Well, thank you, Helen, so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here and share and have this conversation, because it's a conversation that's much needed. You know, I feel like it's getting out there more in the world. We have so many things and so much truth that's being exposed, but it takes a lot of courage for someone to come forward and to be honest and open and sharing about that transformation that happens when there's been something that has happened that has been painful or full of shame, or that you want to hide, or that feels like it needs to stay a secret. But what that did for me, and keeping that a secret, was it just about killed me. You know, I became like my own worst abuser in that way, and just got into drugs and alcohol and all of those things so that I could avoid not looking at my secrets. And I wasn't happy. And I think, I know that we're going to talk. We have a great conversation that's ahead here, and I'm excited that we're sharing this with others. And so I want to just go in small bits so that we're interactive. Yeah.
Let me throw in something right here. Is just the whole topic of shame. I don't know why it popped into my mind, but I'm going to follow that. Our society is so interesting in that it's this combination of incredible, ridiculous focus on sexuality and looking a certain way, and, pornographic images and all of that. And then on the other side is this incredible duality of sex is shameful. And, it's not just sex. I mean, the same thing with addiction, have this drink, have this, this kind of alcohol, and pictures of fun and so forth. And then on the other side, oh my God, you're an addict, you're disgusting. So it's so interesting how and so many religions use shame as a way of controlling people. This is a sin and that's a sin. And you just feel so horrible about yourself, rather than, that energy of compassion and support. And I'm not putting down religions. I'm just saying sometimes that has occurred. So I just wanted to throw that in, because I feel like your story is such a beautiful example of that, how the culture is really what made you stay quiet.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I grew up in the South, and when I was a young girl, it was a place where you were seen but not heard. It was a place where everything was about looking perfect and having flowers planted in the front yard and all this about on the right table, you know what I mean? And
yes.
Was a place, like I remember watching shows like Leave It to Beaver, and, the mom June would be there in her apron and her dress, and,
and her pearls, pearls to do her housework.
And it was like, okay, but there's a lot of stuff behind all that. And it was in the closets. And that's what I ended up doing, was stuffing it, because I don't blame anybody. I think I did when I was younger, because I was so hurt and angry, and it was so painful not to be acknowledged and to be heard and to be asked, well, what do you think? Or how do you feel? And yet at the same time, what I now know, getting to the place where I am in my life, is that wasn't even in my parents' vocabulary, or I think a lot of that generation vocabulary.
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
and it's still not in certain areas. It's still like, oh my gosh, what are the neighbors going to think, and what will they think? I mean, look back, you know, we have a lot of things happening politically right now with abortion and everything, and if you look back, it was like, if you got pregnant back in that time, which when my parents were younger, I guess I was born in 66, so you think about 60s, 70s, people were sending their kids off, like girls who got pregnant, to either have the baby, like hide them away, or they were telling them to get married. They were trying to hide whatever they felt was wrong, right? So it already put us in a place of hiding and secret and shame. And I think we're coming out of that. I think we have the opportunity to come out of that now. So much is being exposed, you know?
Yeah, it's so painful. I mean, you were born right about the time I was giving myself an abortion with a knitting needle.
Uh,
You know, so is that oh, it just makes me sick to think about it, you know, the just waves of pain. But that's the way it was, and that's the way it could be again. And it's
yeah.
like, I'm not, who wants an abortion? You know, nobody wants an abortion. I read something recently that said, I think it was in a Facebook post, that abortion is like a tiger who is trapped in a, you know, a metal trap, chewing off its own leg to get away. You know, we want an abortion about as much as that tiger wants to chew off his leg.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I relate. I had one in college, and you know, I gotta just tell you, I actually was on the pill, and then when I went off the pill, and this is where there was a lot of sickness. I really had a lot of codependency. I was dependent on this boyfriend who was not good to me. He abused me verbally. He abused me physically, and yet I would like go back. And I know now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, that is like that thing where you just go back because it's the pattern, it's the familiarity. It's like, well, they're the only ones that love me. It's this twisted part. So I remember I was like, oh, I'm just going to go off the pill. Well, I knew I'm a smart person and a logical person, and I just did it. And I think there was part of me that was like, well, I wonder if it can happen. And then there was another part of me, oh, well, then maybe I'll be accepted. I mean, that's how in a place of sickness that I was, of not knowing, you know, like what was going on inside and all of these things. And
You
I
know,
did get,
I want to throw something in here too, because
yeah,
one of the thoughts that
yeah.
came to me while I was reading your powerful book was the amazing connection between denial and
Mm-hmm.
shame. And I just kept reading over and over again the denial that, you know, going back to that boyfriend who was abusive, and then being with the gay bisexual guy. You know, it's like the amount of denial that we have to support in order to continue all of these insane destructive patterns is just mind-boggling. And I look back at my own life and feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
The denial, and again, it's part of our culture, you know, is to try to, you know, suppress anything that's going to cause us discomfort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
And we're looking outside of ourselves to resolve things and solve things. We're not looking inside because it's too painful. Honestly, I don't know that I could have walked through it alone to those deep places that I went. You know, having a coach, you know, that I worked with enabled me to walk through so much, and all types of things, trainings and different things. And it was like, I just couldn't see certain things because I hadn't developed the skills to be able to go in, and I was working on skills like I had developed when I was a child, you know, and while they were good for me as a child, like, you know, making sure that I was taking care of myself and my brother and getting through those days my mom was drinking and all of those things, they didn't function for me when I was an adult. You know, it was that codependent behavior that was like, that was not going to translate into being an adult and being able to come up with the discernment and the solutions and things that I needed. I didn't know the information that I needed.
absolutely. And we still cannot see everything about ourselves. I don't know
Right.
about you, but I know I'm going to be in counseling, coaching for the rest of my life, not because I'm dysfunctional, you know, but I suppose I am. I mean, to some degree, everybody is, right? But it's because I value evolution so much. I
Mm-hmm.
want to continue to grow and learn my entire life, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And how do we do that? We have to challenge ourselves.
Agree. I agree with you. You know, my first coach I think that I ever had was in 2009. And it came after an experience of sitting in my closet, and I was ready to kill myself. I had already tried a couple of times in high school. And at this point I had 2 children and I was married, but I just, you know, kept landing back in that same place. You know, maybe there's people that can relate. You're like, oh my gosh, how many times do I have to do this before I get it? But it's like that pattern is so in your neural pathway that it's just got such a deep groove. It's so
Yes.
hard to make a change unless you have that person who, number one, can explain what's going on and you can see that. Number two, who can be there for accountability, because otherwise you just keep going back to it. And number three, they can give you those steps like, oh, okay, here's what needs to happen. And it's like, thank goodness, you know.
And
So
number
since that
four,
time, yeah, yeah,
number four, who cares about you with
mhm.
all your shit exposed?
Yeah, and who doesn't judge you? You know, I think that's the place of being able to be completely open. I said things to my coaches. So after I worked with that coach, I had a spiritual coach that I worked with from 2011 to 13. We dove into this deep sexual shame that I had of rape and abortion. And, you know, always like every time I had sex before I'm going to say 2000, gosh, what would it be? Before night, I'm just going to say when I was young, every time I had sex, I was drunk, you know, until I really like got comfortable and met my now husband and got to a place where I could let it go and I could be myself. Because when I was drunk, I was in control, Helen. And that gave me power over whoever I was with.
At
But
least
when I
you
wasn't,
thought so.
at least I thought so, right? In that moment, right? It was fake, but I thought that I could be there, right? Because there was a different person, like an alter ego that came forward. But then when I wasn't, then it was this person that didn't feel confident. I felt damaged. I felt shameful and all of those things. So working with that spiritual coach during that time, I was able to really bring up a lot, and it was painful. And I had a hard time going to those dark places. So if I hadn't have been working with her at that time, I think it would have been really my demise, you know? So I just encourage, you know, women and men, you've got to have somebody that's going to walk the journey, because you don't have to do it by yourself, you know, and you don't want to.
I'm completely with you. And usually the journey is going to take you to some spiritual place, whether you ever get to thinking of a God or a higher power. But even a higher power, it's like you can even choose nature to be your higher power. But it's so helpful to have a mentor and a belief that there is something bigger than you.
Well, and I think of spiritual when I think of that word spiritual, because I'm very spiritual. I don't consider myself religious, which religious to me is just a construct of what man, what women, what we've created, what people have created that we are supposed to be within.
Me
And
too.
when I grew up, I went to a Catholic school for 6 years. I wasn't Catholic, but I found myself wanting to belong to something. I got a rosary, but I didn't really want to be Catholic, and I didn't know how to do it, but I wanted to belong. And I was always searching. I was a truth seeker. I always have been. And now what I realize, you know, over this path of seeking, I moved to California for the first time in 97. My brother-in-law introduced me to spirituality, and I was also introduced to the practice of yoga and the physical practice. And for me, spirituality is connection. It's connection within. It's connection to that greater wisdom or God or creator or creative intelligence or nature, whatever that is. But there's a connection in that. And it connects us deeply to ourselves, to one another, to life. And until we have that, I think that we're walking around disconnected, unfulfilled, lost, and in denial.
I couldn't agree more. You and I are so like clones in so many ways, although you're, 18 years younger than I am. I completely get it. And if we believe in oneness, that we all, even if just scientifically we came from the Big Bang, it's the same thing. We're all little chunks of that oneness. And there is an essential part of us that is longing to get back to that experience of oneness. And that, I want to throw that in here because I feel like sex can be one way to do that. Yoga, meditation, there are many ways, but sex can also be one way of really viscerally, palpably, physically, and mentally, emotionally, and spiritually feeling that oneness experience, but not if we bring shame into the bedroom. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So I agree with you about the importance of realizing that connection is the essence of what we're all seeking.
Yeah, authentic, like real connection. I was talking to somebody last week, actually, for my podcast, and we were talking, and he and I were both talking, and he was from the South too, and it was interesting. And I said, I'm not a surface person. I don't talk surface stuff, and I think that I love just going and being connected and talking vision and talking depth and talking about life and what fulfills you. It's, to me, it's like, what is even up here? Why not just go right in and ask questions and be able to connect with somebody? And at the same time, we're not going to all resonate with one another. And that's like totally okay. I was a big people pleaser growing up too. And it was like, once I realized, I think that comes with being in an alcoholic home, being a people pleaser, being a peacemaker, wanting everybody to be happy. I was the oldest. I sort of just, wanted to control of things, and things like that. And so it's like, I realized, I was like, you know what, not everybody's going to be, resonate with me, and that's okay too, so self-acceptance and connection, and that real depth of embodying what it is that you want to experience in life. Until you embody it and connect with it yourself, you're not going to see it out here. Right.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I also believe that need to be the good girl comes again from our culture, that, it's okay for men to be wild and have all these different facets, but the woman is still supposed to be the good girl. And I thank God, I believe that is changing to some degree. The whole fight for equality and so forth is part of that fight, right? To be able to be authentic and complicated, just like men are. And men too, of course, are tremendously suppressed. They aren't supposed to be emotional and tender and sensitive. So it's the fight for all of us humans to be able to be more authentic. And you and I both suffered from that as children. I totally see that, and how painful.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I really do believe in the goodness of humanity. I believe that so much is evolving.
Yes.
I really stand for what I call the feminine leadership path. And it's maybe not what most people would think feminine or feminist. What it is that it doesn't exclude men, because we can't just go and bash and do the same thing that has been happening to us or whatnot. Like, that's not the solution. Just like Einstein said, the solution is not at the level of the problem. So if we're looking for a solution, to me, it is about compassion. To me, it is about understanding, why do I come into this box to try to protect myself because I'm afraid of something, and I'm putting everything out there as my enemy? That's not going to work. And so in the feminine leadership path, it's really looking at, how can I be more compassionate? How can I be more understanding? How can I be more of a mediator and really come in touch with the things that I need to from an inner space, and then be able to go out and to do that and share in my relationships, in that, my parenting, how I run my business, and all of that. It might be difficult in a sense of confrontation, but confrontation is not about competition. It's also not about anger or any of those type of things. What it's about is saying, can we peaceably come to a resolution, and understand that we are all one, and that if we don't, the human species is not going to evolve.
Not, let alone evolve. We're not going to survive. Right. We're going to burn up this planet. One thing that touched me that you said about the feminine is about connecting. And of course, there is a balance in all of us between the feminine and the masculine, right? And within men too. And that focus, but the feminine also represents being receptive, because, the feminine receives. And if we can, and you said it later in your discussion there about focusing on understanding. And I hear this over and over again, and I love it, that we get to focus more on understanding each other rather than on being on our high horse and being understood. We have so focused on, don't you get it that you stupid Democrats or you stupid Republicans, don't you get it? Rather than looking for the commonality, as you're saying, recognizing that we are one. And how can we solve the real problems together? Because we all just want the same thing, basically going back to what you said about connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We all want love. We all want safety. We all want to be validated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. I think there's a lot of chaos when, we go into the blame game or we're in denial and we're not willing to look in. But I also believe too, that the root of so much that's happening, and I don't watch the news, but when I do turn it on, I see like the constant playing of the blame and the fear and trying to drum up all this chaos. And I'm like,
and separation.
Exactly. And it's distracting everybody from what is really important. And it's like, wait a minute, I have pain inside. I need to heal. I can heal myself, but I also need to call in help, whether again, it's a therapist or a coach, or maybe it's medical allopathic, or maybe it's, Eastern medicine. What can we each do to take responsibility for our thoughts, our words, our actions? And if it's not aligning with what we're experiencing in our life, then we need to go in here and change things within.
I, again, completely understand and agree. I've rarely had someone on the show with whom I completely agreed philosophically. I'm usually challenging people in some way or another, but it's like, I can't say anything except I agree, because I do agree with everything you're saying, because it all comes back to the oneness. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that moment in the closet and you're thinking, that there's got to be, when am I going to wake up? When am I going to face this or change this? And what it took from you.
Yeah.
What did it take from you to give up the thought of suicide as an option? Because I know there are many people who are going to listen to this podcast who still have suicide as an option, who still have drinking as an option, who still have sexual acting out as an option.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it's, I think everything goes back to the conditioning that I had when I was young. My parents are amazing. We've gotten through a lot, especially since I wrote the book. I grew up the daughter of a lawyer, and I always had all my options. I would be like, oh, well, if A doesn't work, then I'm going to B or C or D. So it was like, I always had an option. I'll tell you that suicide was always on the list. I was like, well, at that age, like when you're younger, you're like, well, if I don't get to go to the party, or if something happens, or if I'm too, drug induced, then suicide's always, it was just there, that suicide ideation. It was just always with me. And in 2009, I was married and my girls were little. They were like 4 and 5, around that age. And we moved back to Georgia, my husband and the girls and I, which is where I grew up. And I always told myself I wasn't ever going to move back there. But obviously I was brought back there for some healing. You know how we're brought back sometimes for things that we have not reconciled within us, right? But I thought, well, I'll just go. My husband's never lived out of California. So I was broke. I had spent quite a large trust fund at that point. Not on frivolous things, but just living for 10 years. And I just didn't know how to manage it. And I didn't want to ask for help. And I had these 2 little girls, and we went back there, and I was drinking, just kind of binging, not every day, but more like binging, but definitely to cover up stuff because I was a stuffer. And also starting to smoke pot again. And I had blacked out a couple of times. And I remember waking up and I was like, what am I doing? This is the same thing my mom did. Like, what am I doing? I didn't want to do this. Like, has anybody ever felt like that, where you go down this pattern road and you're like, wait a minute, I told myself I would never do that, but now I'm doing it. Like, what?
Are you kidding? Has anybody ever done that? I mean, let me count how many millions of people have done that.
Oh, and it's so frustrating. And then you start beating yourself up about that because it's like, can I do anything right? And then you just go back into the same pattern. And it's just like this cycle, and it doesn't end. And I remember just sitting in my closet, and I was just like, all right, here's what I can do. I need them to get the insurance money. So like, how can I do this so that they don't do an autopsy? I mean, Ellen, this is how my brain was thinking, right? I was really trying to logically work it all out so that I could have it figured out so they would get the money and, it wouldn't be so bad. And I mean, like, who does that? And so I'm sitting there and I think I've got a couple of good possibilities, right? And then I feel like, boom. And I hear this, it's not your time. No. And I was like, okay, is this my grandmother? Is this God? Like, what's going on? And I've always been intuitive, but I pushed my feelings down for a long time because I didn't trust them. I just was like avoiding, but I was like, okay, you're right. Like, it got my attention, whatever it was, it got my attention. And I was like, okay, you're right. I've got 2 small girls. What am I doing? Like, what am I doing? But I said, I need a sign. I need a sign because I can't keep going like this, because I was really out of my body. I'd been sick for 5 years. I had autoimmune disease. I had parasites. I had so much going on. I mean, I was basically killing myself, right? That's what I was doing.
Right. Slowly
killing myself. And so I was like, all right, I need a sign. Within that first month, so I get myself up out of the closet, wipe my tears. Nobody even knew I had been in there. I didn't tell anybody for a while, right? And within that month, there were a couple opportunities that became available to me. And one was a life coach training. And I was like, oh, I think I'm good at this. People always tell me they want to tell me things. Like, I'm a peacemaker. Like, I'm good at this. So I went to the life coach training and I got coached. Like, that was an experience that changed my life. And I thought, well, I'm supposed to be here learning how to coach people. What do you mean? Like, that part of me, came up forward. But
no part.
that kind of part that's like the survivor that doesn't want to let anybody in. That's the protector that can't let anybody see our secrets or our shame, because we need to have it all figured out, right? Mm-hmm. And I opened up at that training. But for one of the first times in my life, I opened up and it changed my life.
That is magic.
Just changed my life. And I thought, okay, I can take one more step. It's just like, it was just taking one more step, one more day, one more step, one more day, and it's been a journey. So that's been 10 years. And, not everything magically happened in that moment. And the fireworks didn't go off at the castle and all that. I think a lot of people in that place, they're like, okay, then it's all done. The fireworks are there and I'm here.
It's not like a Disney movie.
No, it's just started. Like, really, the work just started, and it was like, I knew I couldn't do it by myself, and I knew I needed help, and I knew that I had to keep digging in. So I kept practicing my yoga, my meditation. Was I still drinking? I was still drinking some, I was 5 steps ahead of where I was, and I needed to celebrate that. And I think that's a big, big part of that. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm ahead of where I was. Okay, I can keep going.
I appreciate that so much, because that perfectionist mentality, again, that we're all raised with from one input or another, that if it isn't all right, then it's all wrong. Yeah. That I love that focus on, I was making progress. And, this touched me in your book, and you've mentioned it a couple of times. I wanted to pick up on the thread about how intuitive you were as a child. And I also, it's interesting, I also had the attraction to Catholicism, and I would cross myself at meals. And even though my family was completely thought that was weird, and I went to church by myself as a child. Yeah, because I was seeking something. And I want to say that, I want to emphasize that, and see what you think about it, and whether you think all children have that, some kind of knowing like that, and they just learn to suppress it, or do you think it's something rare? I mean, part of the reason I'm asking this is because I've had so many clients over the years who said, oh, my kids don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. We don't fight in front of them, or we tell them everything is fine, or whatever it is. And I want to see what you think about how common that is, that children have a deep awareness and a deep, desperate desire for answers.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Well, our girls now are 16 and 17. Woohoo! Can I just get a medal for like teenagers?
Yes.
I mean, I mean, they're amazing and they've grown me up so beautifully. Like seriously, like it's been challenging, but they've helped me to grow and we've helped each other and we're still in it, and it's just
Of
it's such
course.
a challenging time. I mean, so
And
I think,
it'll just translate into the next challenging and
yeah.
wonderful time.
Well, it's all those things mixed together and it's like
Yes.
it's really amazing. So when I was so intuitive and I think that's one of the gifts too, I think of being an observer that grew out of my mom being an alcoholic is that I'm great I'm a great hostess at a party. I am a really good observer of what's happening around me because when I was young, I needed to do that just to make sure I was going to be safe. I just really took that upon myself. And so I think as children, when children come into the world, they're already so connected to source because they're so close to it, right? They've just arrived in this body. Their soul has just come here for this awakening into this human experience. And what happens is that I think through the fear, parents get a little frightened, whether it's the umbrella of their religion that tells them it's wrong, or just their fear, or just trying to maintain some sort of control, right? And being influenced by the world. And I think that children are so intuitive, like they feel,
Oops.
they understand things. Some of them hear things. Some of them have imaginary friends even, and they're not imaginary. So it's like, but what happens is the parents will say, oh no, you can't be seeing that. Or, oh no, that's not right. Or this. And so the
Mhm.
children then forget. And then they start to push things down because they want to be loved and accepted. And they trust that caregiver complicitly, right? And it's like, that's when the conditioning starts. That's when the environmental conditioning of whatever experience that you're in with whatever authority figures you're with, you trust them. So you just believe what they say, right? And as you get older, you start to go, is that really what I believe? Right? Do I believe in this? Do I believe in Catholicism? Is this my path? Do I believe this about money, what they used to say? Do I believe that we shouldn't talk about things in front of our children, which I don't think that's the best thing. I think that, they need to see you resolve things. They need to see you have a little argument and then get past it and make up. They need to see these examples and these modeling of caring, compassionate adults who are able to move through things and work through things in life.
I agree with that too. And I'm thinking also about what you were saying about being the oldest child. Um, I was functionally the oldest. I had a kind of a throwaway older brother that my parents sent away for a while because they had too many kids. And I wonder if that tendency to observe and be hyper vigilant and notice everything and feel like you have to caretake others and all of that is also partly connected to that, to you being the oldest.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I mean, I haven't read any books on birth order, but I know there's several out there, and I've been to discussions where they talk about it, it was actually funny. I went to a conference and the person who started out leading the conference said, okay, here's what the scene was like when we all came in. Those firstborn people were just getting to their chair. They were getting organized. They were looking to make sure they had all their papers and they were sitting and ready. The middle child was kind of like hanging out, wherever, kind of in the back of the room. The babies would come in and go, all right, what are we going to do that's fun, And I was like, that was so right on. So I think birth order is fascinating.
I do too. And I, regarding it related back to what you were saying about everyone is born with intuition. I completely agree with that too. And I think that what you were saying about everybody wants to be loved and to belong, and pretty quickly that takes over, the ego desire to protect yourself takes over from the intuition, and the baby of the family looks around and says, oh, I can belong by being a baby and not noticing things. Somebody else is going to notice them for me, and that's going to make them feel good. Anyway, I just think it's so interesting how that plays into it too. And for those of us who are firstborn or whatever, there is a tendency for us to be the ones who feel responsible to be the leader.
Sure. And then we can get into our perfectionism or compare-itis or whatever those things that we have, or achieving, but just not feeling fulfilled. It's like we have this idea of what we think. Like I had an idea of what I thought success was. It was my dad putting on his suit, going to work, coming home in a bad mood, having a cocktail, having dinner, and then going to bed. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, he makes a lot of money, so I definitely want to do that. But in a subconscious way, it was imprinted upon me of, how he acted and how he was feeling and what did you have to do? And so when you get older, you kind of start to unravel all those things, and see, well, where am I aligning? Am I aligning up with what I want? And now success is very different for me. And this is what I actually help women with too. It's like, what is your definition of success? What is it about being fulfilled romantically in your relationship? What is it about being fulfilled in your business? What is it about being mission fulfilled in your life? It's really looking at all of those things for yourself and really seeing what that is.
And I agree with what you were saying earlier too, Camden, about the need to get away from competition and performance and comparison. And even the whole idea of success is part of that paradigm. If you think about it, it's like we don't even need to evaluate whether we're successful or not. We need to evaluate whether we feel good about what we're doing. Just the things you just listed. How do you feel about the fulfillment in your sex life, in your career, in your parenting, whatever? It's so much more about fulfillment. And if we could leave out the whole success part and just talk about fulfillment, then everybody could find their own level, their own way of being. I'm fulfilled being a house cleaner. I love it. I love it. I love not having any children. I mean, whatever your fulfillment is. And you were saying earlier too that, or maybe it was in the book, I don't remember which, but how your life has been so guided by your spiritual connection, not starting with the "it's not your time" moment, starting when you were very young, but certainly reaching a crescendo at that time in 2009 when you said, when something said it's not your time.
Yeah.
And how does that show up now in your life, being guided spiritually? And what can you tell our listeners? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What does it sound like?
Well, for me, it really is connecting in every single day to that source. And so I do that through, as I wake up, I just say, thank you. For this amazing day. And what I used to do was be like, okay, what's on my to-do list? Blah, 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 blah. But it's like really taking the time, the moment, the space to connect in. I meditate. I do journaling, and this can come in different forms and also different times of according to what I have available in the morning, because I'm still getting the kids out the door and it can get busy. Because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't have time for all that, or how do I fit all that in? And it's like, it might be 3 breaths in the morning to simply come into the awareness of what's my adventure today, So I don't ever want to feel like people are saying no because I don't have time or this or that. Because this is what I say in my yoga class. I'm like, guys, if you can't do this pose, there is always an option. Because I've had somebody come to a therapeutic class I taught. He was paralyzed. He could only move his eyelids. So if he can come and breathe, then I know that you can do absolutely anything. You know what I'm saying? So that's that denial part, right? Where we want to avoid things. And it's like, wait a minute, let's all come back. So whatever that intention, for some people, it might be painting, it's like, what brings you to that beautiful connected space within yourself where you're like, cool. Oh my gosh. Yes. And you start to have a different outlook on your life. You start to have a different outlook of what's available to you, what possibility there is,
And since we said we were going to talk about shame, how does this all, and sexuality, the releasing the shame and sacred sexuality, can you connect what you were just talking about to your current practice and belief about that?
Yes. So I'll just share with you, and being fully transparent, I'm still working out a lot with my sexual intimacy. I still am at a place where I can feel a little bit shy about things because it's fully accepting myself. But what I know is that sexual energy is energy. I can be in a yoga class and I can feel the same energy that I feel when I have an orgasm now. It is all energy. And so what I looked at in my past was why, because I thought I equated sex and love. Okay. When I was younger, I thought if I could just get that person, or if I could have sex with that person, then maybe they'll love me. And what I really needed was loving myself and being connected to myself and being my own best friend in that way. And it was really hard for me to do that because I was angry at myself, because I felt shame about
Right.
these secrets. I felt shame that I had brought it on myself. I felt shame that my mom was an alcoholic. I felt shame that I had had an abortion. I felt shame that I had been raped, and not only raped one time, but raped 3 times. I felt shame that I had buck teeth and I was ugly when I was little. I mean, there were so many things that were just in me, and I was beating myself up. So honestly, this book was so healing, which I wrote a couple of years ago. Working with somebody to dig in and saying it out loud, I couldn't even get these things out of my throat. It was
Wow.
stuck all through here. And so the yoga called me. It really saved me. It brought me back into my body and helped me to move things. So I appreciate my physical practice so much. I appreciate being able to speak. I couldn't get up in front of a group and speak. What? Are you kidding me? I couldn't even talk to myself about this kind of stuff.
Right.
So I guess what I would share with someone is what is that one place where that you could start that would have a domino effect? For me, it was yoga that called me. It really was. It was the practice, the physical practice, because it started to unpeel, unlayer me, or blossom me. Then it was, okay, this is all coming up. What do I do with it? I need somebody to help me sift through it. So while I was having my practices on my own, I needed a guide. I really did. I needed a guide because it was going to be too much and too painful. So I think those two things, looking at that for somebody, is to look at what is a practice I could have that could start to move things physically, because whatever you've been stuffing might be down and you want to feel connected, but it's just covered up. So how can you start to move it? And then how can you start to express it in a safe environment with
And
someone?
getting it out of your body.
Exactly.
And I would add something that has really helped me tremendously, and that is to develop sacred spiritual rituals that my husband and I do before we begin a sexual experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be anything that you both agree that you like, but to create a sacred space and to create a sacred ritual that just says, we're inviting the oneness, we're inviting spirituality into our sexuality, we're integrating it, because that's something we are definitely not taught in our society, is to integrate the spiritual with the sexual. I know that you are in yoga, but in everyday society, that's just not what we're raised with. So I just wanted to add that piece on, that I think we are reluctant to do some kind of spiritual thing, praying or meditating together or sending chi to each other, or however that ritual might look. But it establishes the safety and relaxation that we need in order to have passionate intimacy. And I know you would agree with that about the real thing that we're all still working on. And I so appreciate your willingness to say, I'm still working on that, because who isn't still working on that? And again, we're all going to be still working on that, whatever it is, for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I too, I've worked with couples before as well, and worked with them individually in coaching. And what I have discovered too is that it's about the individual growth. Like, I know my husband and I kind of grow like this. I will come here, he'll come here, he'll come here, he'll come here. And we do our own work individually, with our
love
coaches.
that. I love that.
With our practices and our rituals and things. And then at the same time, we want to grow the entity of our marriage, whether you're married, whether you're in a partnership, whatever that is, but you want to grow the entity of that as well. And so it's how do we stay on our individual paths, right? And also grow the entity. And I think it is coming into that sacredness of, what are the rituals that we create together? What is the connection? Oftentimes it can be a marriage meeting. Oftentimes it can be, like you said, setting a sacred space for that intimacy that you have. Maybe you even go on retreat, or maybe you set a special day aside. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I haven't had I haven't made love with my husband for 3 weeks, and time just gets away and we're tired at the end of the day. I'm like, well, what about lunch? Or what about the morning? Or could you set the alarm earlier and schedule it? And while I know scheduling may not sound like so romantic, but if that's the way it's going to happen, then get past that, right? Because maybe you're avoiding something by not scheduling it. You know what I'm saying?
Hello.
Stuff, right? And then just schedule it and create a beautiful space, whatever's important for you. And each person to think about, what do you need? What do you need? And being able to communicate that. I think that is very big, whether you write a little note or to them and say what you're excited about, or whether you're actually able to verbally say, here's what I really need. And you know what, Helen, another thing that I love is I do love the love languages. I don't know if you've, familiarized yourself or read that book. Have you read the 5 love languages book?
I have mixed feelings about it because I don't want to put people in categories, but I definitely value the concepts, and I agree that, we do have certain tendencies.
Yeah, I value that too. I'm totally with you on that. I guess I just like the way that they just kind of outlined it. If there's other things that people gravitate toward, great. But I think the point is knowing what fulfills you. Like you were referring to earlier, that is your fulfillment, in life. What fulfills you? Is it that you have quality, you need to be touched, or, that you like that words of affirmation or appreciation, or what is that?
Acts of service for me, baby. Acts of service.
But if your partner doesn't know that, and your partner's not doing acts of service and they're leaving you gifts and you're like, well, that's nice, but it's not doing much for you, then you're kind of missing the mark.
Exactly.
And vice versa for your partner. So it's like, I think, again, it's connection. We go back to connection every single time. How do you connect? How do you communicate? How do you express, right, through whatever is fulfilling for them? And how do they express that for you? Because that's going to be longevity, passion, depth. My husband and I have been together for 22 years, 20 married. And I look and I think, gosh, we have such a depth of our relationship. We've been through so much, I feel like so much. And he's accepted so much of me, and I've accepted. And we're coming even to a new place of compassion and understanding. And because of that, I feel like our physical intimacy is at a new place too. I feel more liberated than I ever have, and no shame.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh. Whereas before,
awesome.
Again, it was like, I would either need to be drunk or just not present. I mean, because basically that's what being drunk is, right? Is not present. It's like, I can be out of my body, but I can still be here. But what is that doing? I'm not connected at all.
I completely agree. And I'm so glad you shared that about the longevity piece, because I have so many clients that say, our sex life's gone to hell, but we've been married 20 years. So what do you expect? Or we've been married 10 years or 5 years. And I say, that's complete bullshit. I remember my grandmother got remarried at 80, and her boyfriend or her husband was 82, and they had been lovers early in life. And he was talking to my sister saying, yeah, we only have sex about 3 times a week now, not like when we were young. And she's just like, so it's so not true. It is just so not true. I have good friends that have been married 45 years, maybe 46 by now. And it just keeps, your sexuality reflects your own evolution as individuals and as a couple. And that's what you're saying. And I love it and want to underscore that. I feel like we could talk forever, but I feel like, you have shared so much about your own process, and about what I've come away with is being not only impressed with your incredible dedication to transformation and evolution and seeking the truth, which I value more than anything in life. So I love you. After an hour, I'm just loving you more and more, because you're so aligned with what I believe. And I can't help it. If you're not aligned with what I believe, I love you as a human, but I might not feel that affinity for you. And I can feel the power of the work you do. I can feel the power of the work you do. And I want, to have a supportive connection, with you. And I also want to have you tell the audience how they can find you and what kind of things you're offering nowadays. And I just feel like you've got so much to offer the world, and we need you.
Thank you, Helen, so much. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And it's definitely been a journey. Again, I think people, women especially, see me here, and it's like, I want you to know it's a journey, and it's a willingness to be vulnerable and open up. And that's how I work with my clients. You know, I really work with women and some men actually too, but women who want to step into more awareness, their personal power, and that feminine leadership path. And it starts here, you know, and it's like getting an understanding of some of those things that need to be broken up and released so that you can fully liberate what it is to be fulfilled in your life, what it is to live with ease, what it is to live connected to creativity, and you know, and just being in the world in a very confident, courageous, open place in your life. So I work with individuals one-on-one. I'm also launching a new membership, which I'm super excited about, because right now I feel like as women, it is important for us to gather in community.
Yes.
Not only will we gather online, but we're going to have retreats. I lead retreats. So we're going to have retreats that many of you will meet me at. We'll have workshops on Zoom and in person. And we're going to be looking at this and diving into this feminine leadership path from the sense of becoming more aware through meditation, through practices, letting go of any of those blocks and that shame, being able to be in a sacred, supportive group of women, having practices that you can bring in and that you can have that continued growth, you know, not only for yourself, but in your family and with your partner and in your community. So I really see this need, and I'm excited to begin this. We're going to have a formal launch in the fall. If you're interested in getting on the waiting list or learning more about it, you can go to camdenhoch.com. So it's just my name, camdenhoch.com.
And
there
Hoch is Hoch.
Correct. That's right. And then you can also, you'll have my book is there if you'd like to order it. It's an Audible as well, if you like it. And I actually do read the book as well. And there's some bonus chapters there. And, you know, I have a lot of YouTube videos of different yoga sequences. So you can just basically Google, and then all of a sudden you'll be like, oh my goodness. So there's all kinds of opportunities for us to connect. I'm on Instagram too. And I would really love that if you find something that resonated here. It was a beautiful conversation, and you feel like, oh my gosh, like Helen said, you can go and talk so much longer. So if you want to continue the conversation, I look forward to meeting you and connecting.
Well, thank you so much. And I know that people will want to connect to you because you bring the most loving, compassionate, open, vulnerable, honest way of being to people. And that's what we are seeking, just as you said, that connection. And you're so easy to connect to and have this wisdom that just radiates from you. So I thank you so much for joining us today. And I wish you all the best in your new endeavors, and bless you.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And it was a great conversation, and I look forward to continuing. So thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you.